There's a strange kind of magnetism that appears when a person stops asking the world for permission to exist. You have felt it before. Perhaps you entered a room and noticed someone who was not the loudest person there, not the most attractive, not the wealthiest, and not the one trying hardest to be seen. Yet something about them pulled your attention. They were calm. They were present. They were not reaching outward for approval, validation, affection, or confirmation. They seemed to possess an invisible center of gravity. And without saying very much, they changed the atmosphere around them. People became curious. Opportunities seemed to move toward them. Others listened when they spoke. They did not chase life. Life appeared to respond to them. What creates this kind of presence? Why do some people seem to carry an energy that reality cannot ignore, while others spend years pushing, proving, explaining, and struggling, only to feel invisible? Carl Jung believed that the forces shaping your life do not begin in the external world. They begin in the hidden regions of your psyche. Your conscious intentions may say that you want love, success, freedom, recognition, peace, or abundance. But beneath those intentions exists an entire unconscious world made of fears, wounds, memories, complexes, projections, and identities you may not even realize you are carrying. And this unseen world is constantly speaking. It speaks through your posture. It speaks through the way you enter a room. It speaks through the people you pursue. It speaks through what you tolerate. It speaks through your hesitation, your urgency, your silence, and your choices. You may think you are communicating with reality through your words, but reality is often responding to the psychological state beneath your words. This is why two people can say the same sentence and create completely different reactions. One asks for respect while unconsciously expecting rejection. The other says almost nothing, yet their inner certainty establishes a boundary before anyone attempts to cross it. One says they are ready for love while carrying the hidden belief that they must earn affection. The other has stopped abandoning themselves, and their very presence communicates that love must meet them where they are. One wants success, but secretly identifies with struggle. The other has released the need to prove their worth through suffering. The difference is not simply confidence. It is inner organization. It is psychological coherence. It is what happens when your conscious mind and your unconscious life stop pulling in opposite directions. When this happens, your energy changes. Your decisions change. Your relationships change. The way people perceive you changes. And gradually, the reality around you begins to respond. But before reality can respond differently, you must understand why it has been responding to you the way it has. Most people believe they are observing reality objectively. They look at their circumstances and say, "This is simply the way things are." They look at their relationships and say, "People always treat me this way." They look at their finances, their career, their body, or their past, and conclude, "This is what is possible for me." But Jung understood that we do not see the world exactly as it is. We see it through the structure of our psyche. Every experience passes through an inner filter. Your memories influence what you notice. Your wounds influence what feels dangerous. Your complexes influence who attracts you. Your unconscious beliefs influence which opportunities you recognize and which ones you dismiss before they ever begin. In other words, the world you experience is not only the world outside you. It is also the world as interpreted by everything inside you. This is why changing external circumstances without changing the internal pattern often creates the same result in a new form. You leave one relationship and meet the same emotional dynamic in another person. You escape one oppressive environment and unconsciously recreate the same power structure somewhere else. You earn more money, but continue to feel unsafe. You receive attention, but still feel invisible. You reach a goal, but cannot experience satisfaction. The scenery changes. The psychological pattern remains. And because the pattern remains, reality continues to feel strangely familiar. Jung wrote that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you'll call it fate. This may be one of the most important psychological truths you will ever hear, because what you call bad luck may sometimes be an unconscious repetition. What you call rejection may sometimes be the result of abandoning yourself before anyone else has the chance. What you call invisibility may sometimes be the consequence of hiding your real personality behind a mask designed to keep everyone comfortable. What you call being stuck may sometimes be loyalty to an identity you formed during pain. You cannot create a powerful inner state while remaining unconscious of what has been controlling you. You cannot become magnetic while constantly leaking your energy into fear, approval-seeking, resentment, comparison, and the need to be chosen. And you cannot expect reality to respond to a version of you that you refuse to embody. This is where the process begins, not with forcing the external world to change, not with pretending everything is positive, not with repeating phrases that your nervous system does not believe, It begins with taking your psychological authority back. Most people do not realize how much authority they have given to the external world. A message determines their mood. A facial expression determines their worth. A delay determines whether they feel safe. Someone's silence determines whether they feel loved. A number in a bank account determines whether they feel powerful. A stranger's opinion determines whether they trust themselves. Their internal state rises and falls according to circumstances they cannot control. This creates a reactive personality. And a reactive personality cannot become deeply magnetic because it has no stable center. It is always adjusting, always anticipating, always asking, what do they think of me? Always looking outside itself for instructions on how to feel. When someone approves, it expands. When someone withdraws, it collapses. When circumstances look favorable, it believes. When circumstances become difficult, it loses itself. This is not inner power. It is psychological dependence. And many people have been living this way for so long that it feels normal. They believe their emotions are simply reactions to the world. They do not see that over time, repeated reactions become identities. A person experiences rejection and begins to identify as unwanted. A person experiences betrayal and begins to identify as unsafe. A person experiences failure and begins to identify as incapable. A person experiences criticism and begins to identify as inadequate. Then, that identity begins to organize perception. The unwanted person notices distance. The unsafe person notices threats. The incapable person notices obstacles. The inadequate person notices everyone who appears superior. Their identity becomes a lens, and that lens shapes their reality. This does not mean that every painful event is imagined or self-created. It means that the meaning you attach to an event can continue shaping your life long after the event has ended. The wound happened once, but the identity formed around the wound may repeat it 1,000 times. This is why healing is not merely feeling better about the past. Healing is withdrawing your identity from what happened to you. It is refusing to let one chapter become the author of your entire life. And when you do this, something profound begins to occur. The energy that was trapped in survival becomes available for creation. The attention that was trapped in monitoring others returns to you. The power that was trapped in resentment becomes clarity. The life force that was trapped behind the persona begins to emerge. Jung used the word persona to describe the social mask we develop in order to function in the world. The persona is not always negative. You need different social roles. You may behave differently at work, with family, with strangers, or in private. The problem begins when a mask becomes more important than the person behind it. Many people have spent years constructing an identity designed to be accepted. They became agreeable because honesty created conflict. They became useful because usefulness brought attention. They became strong because vulnerability was not safe. They became quiet because their truth made others uncomfortable. They became successful because achievement temporarily protected them from shame. They became endlessly understanding because they feared that boundaries would make people leave. Eventually, they no longer know where the mask ends and the real self begins. They say, "This is just who I am." But often, it is not who they are. It is who they learn to become in order to survive their environment. And there's an enormous difference. The persona can make you socially acceptable while psychologically invisible. Others may like you, but they do not truly know you. They may rely on you, but they do not encounter your depth. They may praise your strength while never realizing how exhausted you are. They may appreciate your kindness while repeatedly violating your limits. And because the mask receives the love, the real self remains unconvinced. This is why approval can feel empty. The part being approved is not always the part you most deeply identify with. So you seek more approval, more praise, more evidence, more people, more achievement. But nothing reaches the hidden place because the hidden place has never been presented. True magnetism begins when you stop asking the mask to carry your entire life. It begins when your outer presence becomes more honest, not reckless, not aggressive, not cruel, honest. You stop smiling when your soul is saying no. You stop explaining boundaries that do not require a courtroom defense. You stop shrinking your intelligence to protect someone else's insecurity. You stop pretending not to care about what matters deeply to you. You stop acting detached when you are afraid. You stop performing strength when what you need is rest. Each time you become honest, the psyche recovers energy. Each time you betray yourself, the psyche loses energy. This is why some people feel powerful without making an effort. Their energy is not divided by constant self-betrayal. Their words, choices, body, and inner convictions are moving in the same direction. They are coherent, and coherence creates presence. You can feel when someone means what they say. You can feel when a boundary is real. You can feel when a person is not available for manipulation. You can feel when someone has stopped negotiating against themselves. This is not mystical in the way many people imagine. It is psychological. The human nervous system is constantly reading signals. Tone, timing, eye contact, tension, hesitation, congruence, contradiction. People may not consciously understand what they are sensing, but they often sense when a person does not believe their own words. They sense when no means convince me. They sense when confidence is covering desperation. They sense when kindness is being used to purchase affection. They sense when detachment is a performance designed to provoke pursuit. They also sense when someone is grounded, when someone is present, when someone has nothing to prove. That is why inner work changes the way people respond to you even before they know what changed. Your energy becomes clearer because your unconscious contradictions are no longer dominating the interaction. But to reach this coherence, you must encounter the shadow. The shadow contains the qualities, impulses, desires, emotions, and possibilities that you have rejected from your conscious identity. If you identify as endlessly kind, your anger may enter the shadow. If you identify as independent, your need for support may enter the shadow. If you identify as spiritual, your ambition, sexuality, envy, or desire for recognition may enter the shadow. If you identify as strong, your grief and fear may disappear beneath the surface. The shadow does not vanish because you refuse to acknowledge it. It becomes autonomous. It influences you from behind the scenes. And one of the primary ways the shadow expresses itself is projection. Projection occurs when you encounter something within yourself through another person. You may admire in someone else a freedom you have denied yourself. You may resent their confidence because you have suppressed your own. You may become obsessed with someone who embodies qualities your psyche is trying to awaken in you. You may feel irrationally threatened by a person whose behavior activates a part of yourself you refuse to see. Projection is one reason certain people can occupy your mind for months or years. The intensity is not always about who they objectively are. Sometimes they have become the screen upon which your unconscious is displaying something important. The person you cannot stop chasing may carry your unclaimed sense of worth. The person whose approval you desperately need may represent the authority you have not developed within yourself. The person you cannot forgive may be carrying qualities you are afraid to acknowledge in your own shadow. The person you idealize may reflect your unlived potential. As long as the projection remains outside you, they hold power. You feel as though they possess something you need. Their attention feels like life. Their withdrawal feels like death. Their presence activates you. Their absence empties you. You call it chemistry, destiny, or love. But sometimes, it is the psyche demanding that you reclaim a lost part of yourself. This is where magnetism is often misunderstood. People try to become magnetic so that a specific person will choose them. But the need to be chosen is precisely what destroys their center. They organize their behavior around the other person. They watch for signs. They calculate messages. They try to appear unavailable. They suppress honesty. They become consumed by the response. Their energy says, "You possess the power to determine how I experience myself." That is not magnetism. That is psychological surrender. The moment you withdraw the projection, your energy returns. You begin asking different questions. Instead of "How can I make them see my value?" you ask, "Why did I place my value in their hands?" Instead of "What do they have that I need?" you ask, "What quality are they awakening that I have not yet developed?" Instead of "How can I get them back?" you ask, "What part of myself did I abandon while trying to keep them?" These questions are not easy. They remove the fantasy, but they also remove the chains. You stop chasing the person who appears to hold your wholeness. You begin integrating the qualities you projected onto them. Perhaps you admired their boldness. You become more courageous. Perhaps you admired their independence. You develop a life that is emotionally your own. Perhaps you admired their creativity. You return to the work you abandoned. Perhaps you admired their mystery. You discover the inner world you neglected while studying theirs. As these qualities return to you, the obsession weakens. Not because the person suddenly became meaningless, but because they're no longer carrying your entire unlived life. Your energy becomes magnetic again because it is no longer trapped in projection. And this same principle applies far beyond relationships. You may project power onto money. You believe you will become valuable when you possess a certain amount. You may project freedom onto success. You believe you will finally breathe when others recognize your work. You may project peace onto the future. You believe you will relax when everything is resolved. But as long as peace, worth, power, and freedom exist only outside you, the external world remains your master. You chase what you believe contains you. And the more desperately you chase, the more you reinforce the belief that you do not possess it. This is why the inner state must come first. Not because you can simply imagine anything and force the universe to deliver it. but because the state from which you live determines the quality of your perception, behavior, endurance, relationships, and decisions. A person who feels fundamentally powerless makes different choices from a person who is connected to inner authority. A person who feels unworthy interprets opportunities differently from someone who believes they are permitted to participate in life. A person ruled by fear will reject possibilities that require visibility. A person ruled by shame may sabotage the very success they consciously desire. A person who believes love must be earned may remain attracted to emotionally unavailable people because uncertainty feels familiar. Your psychological state is not merely a feeling. It is an organizing principle. It influences what you approach, what you avoid, what you tolerate, what you repeat, what you notice, what you consider possible. And this is how reality begins responding to it. Imagine two people receiving the same opportunity. One immediately thinks, I'm not prepared. Someone else would be better. What if I embarrass myself? Their body contracts. Their voice changes. They delay. They overthink. They may eventually decline. The second person also feels fear, but their identity is not organized around inadequacy. They think, I can learn. I'm allowed to grow into this. They ask questions. They take action. They become more capable through participation. The external opportunity was the same. The inner state created two different realities. Or imagine two people entering a relationship. One carries an unconscious fear of abandonment. They monitor every change in tone. They interpret space as rejection. They overgive to prevent loss. They suppress needs. They become resentful. They may accuse, cling, withdraw, or test the other person. Eventually, the relationship becomes unstable. The second person may also care deeply, but they possess a more secure center. They communicate. They tolerate temporary uncertainty. They maintain their life. They do not use self-abandonment as proof of love. Again, the internal state shapes the relational reality. This does not mean that confidence guarantees every outcome. Life is not a machine that rewards the right emotional performance. You will still encounter disappointment, loss, delay, rejection, uncertainty. But when your center is strong, these events do not define your identity. You experience the event without becoming the event. You can be rejected without becoming rejected. You can fail without becoming a failure. You can be misunderstood without losing the understanding of yourself. You can lose something without losing your soul. This is what makes the inner state powerful. It is not the absence of difficulty. It is the refusal to let difficulty dictate who you are. And paradoxically, this often changes external outcomes because you become less reactive. You make cleaner decisions. You recover faster. You stop wasting years pursuing closed doors. You become available for opportunities that your old obsession prevented you from seeing. You speak differently. You carry yourself differently. You choose people differently. You stop negotiating from fear. And life responds to the person you are now embodying. Jung called the deeper organizing center of the psyche the self. The self is not the ego. The ego is the conscious sense of I. It is the identity you know, your name, your story, your preferences, your social position. The self is larger. It includes both conscious and unconscious aspects of the psyche. It represents the movement toward wholeness. When the ego believes it is the entire personality, it becomes rigid. It tries to control everything. It clings to certainty. It protects the persona. It rejects the shadow. It wants life to follow the plan because anything unexpected threatens its identity. But the self often communicates through disruption. A relationship ends. A role becomes unbearable. A goal that once motivated you feels empty. An old identity begins collapsing. You may interpret this as failure, but psychologically, it may be the beginning of individuation. Individuation is the process of becoming more fully who you are, not who your family required you to be, not who society rewarded, not who your fear constructed, who you are beneath the adaptations. This process is rarely comfortable. The old identity does not disappear politely. It resists. It argues. It creates doubt. The ego says, stay where it is familiar. The deeper self says, you have outgrown this. The ego says, keep everyone pleased. The self says, stop leaving yourself. The ego says, prove your worth. The self says, your life is not a performance. The ego says, control every outcome. The self says, become aligned enough to meet what comes. The tension between these voices is where transformation occurs. Many people turn back at this stage because the old life may become unstable before the new identity becomes visible. They stop receiving the same validation. Certain relationships become strained. People who benefited from their lack of boundaries may call them selfish. People who understood their old mask may say they have changed. And they have changed. That is the point. A more authentic life cannot always preserve every agreement made by an inauthentic identity. This is why becoming powerful can initially feel lonely. You're no longer fully available for your old world, but your new world has not yet formed. This space can feel empty. But emptiness is not always absence. Sometimes it is the room required for a new life to enter. Do not fill it too quickly. Do not run back to the old patterns simply because it is familiar. Learn to remain in the unknown without abandoning yourself. This is one of the greatest sources of magnetism, the ability to stay centered when certainty disappears. Most people become desperate in uncertainty. They force conversations. They demand immediate answers. They chase people who are withdrawing. They accept poor opportunities because waiting feels unbearable. They return to familiar pain because unfamiliar possibility has no guarantees. But when you can remain present in the unknown, your choices improve. You stop acting merely to escape discomfort. You give reality time to reveal what is actually occurring. You observe. You listen. You respond rather than react. This creates an entirely different energy. It is not passive. It is receptive. There's a difference. Passivity is the refusal to participate. Receptivity is participation without desperation. A receptive person acts when action is clear. They speak when truth is necessary. They leave when a pattern has revealed itself. They wait when forcing would create distortion. They are not controlling every movement. They are not collapsing either. This state is powerful because it is not leaking energy into panic. And panic is one of the greatest destroyers of magnetism. Panic narrows perception. It makes every delay feel permanent. Every silence feel personal. Every obstacle feel like proof. It forces you to solve problems from the same state that created them. You think faster, but see less. You act more, but accomplish less. You speak more, but communicate less. You chase movement instead of alignment. To build a state reality must respond to, you must learn to interrupt the cycle of psychological reaction. The first step is awareness. Notice what happens inside you when reality does not match your expectation. Someone does not reply. A plan is delayed. You receive criticism. An opportunity disappears. Your numbers fall. A person changes. What is the first story your mind creates? I am losing. I am unwanted. I knew this would happen. Nothing works for me. I am not enough. These thoughts are not always objective interpretations. They may be the voice of an old complex. A complex is an emotionally charged cluster of memories, beliefs, and reactions organized around a theme. You may have an abandonment complex, an inferiority complex, a rejection complex, a power complex. When activated, the complex temporarily takes over your perception. You do not merely remember the wound. You become the version of yourself formed inside it. The adult disappears. The rejected child takes control. The calm professional disappears. The frightened self takes control. The grounded partner disappears. The abandoned self begins writing messages. And because the reaction feels intense, you assume it must be true. But intensity is not always evidence. Sometimes intensity means the present has touched the past. This realization gives you space. Instead of immediately obeying the feeling, you observe it. You can say, a part of me feels abandoned right now. This is different from saying, I am being abandoned. You can say, a part of me believes this delay means failure. This is different from saying, this is proof that I will fail. Language matters because it creates psychological distance. You're no longer completely identified with the complex. You become the observer, and the observer possesses choice. The next step is containment. Containment means allowing the emotional energy to exist without immediately releasing it through destructive behavior. You do not send a message while activated. You do not make the permanent decision during a temporary storm. You do not explain yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. You do not abandon the project because one day produced discouraging results. You feel the reaction. You breathe. You write. You walk. You rest. You speak with someone trustworthy. You allow the nervous system to return before you decide what reality means. This is not suppression. Suppression says, I should not feel this. Containment says, I can feel this without becoming controlled by it. Each time you practice containment, you strengthen your inner center. You teach yourself that emotion does not have to become destiny. The third step is investigation. Ask what the reaction is protecting. Perhaps your anger is protecting grief. Perhaps your detachment is protecting longing. Perhaps your perfectionism is protecting shame. Perhaps your need to control is protecting fear. Perhaps your constant productivity is protecting the belief that rest makes you worthless. The behavior is rarely the deepest layer. The psyche creates defenses for a reason. Do not attack the defense before understanding what it has been trying to do for you. You may discover that the part of you sabotaging intimacy is not trying to destroy love. It is trying to prevent another betrayal. The part procrastinating may not be lazy. It may associate visibility with criticism. The part that cannot receive may believe that receiving creates debt. The part that keeps choosing unavailable people may be trying to recreate a childhood wound in the hope of finally changing the ending. When you understand the intention beneath the pattern, you can create a healthier solution. You no longer need to hate yourself into transformation. Self-hatred fragments the psyche further. Awareness integrates it. The fourth step is embodiment. This is where many people stop. They understand the pattern intellectually, but continue behaving the same way. Insight without embodiment becomes another form of avoidance. You know you need boundaries, but you still say yes. You know the relationship is repeating a wound, but you remain available for fragments. You know the persona is exhausting you, but you continue performing. You know your work matters, but you keep hiding it. At some point, the new state must enter the body. It must become action, a boundary, a conversation, a schedule, a decision, a departure, a beginning. You cannot think yourself into a new identity while repeatedly acting from the old one. The psyche learns through experience. Each new action provides evidence. When you say no and survive the disappointment of another person, your nervous system learns that boundaries are not death. When you show your work and tolerate being seen, your nervous system learns that visibility is survivable. When you stop chasing someone and remain with yourself, your nervous system learns that absence does not equal annihilation. When you rest without earning it, your body learns that your worth is not dependent on exhaustion. Embodiment turns a concept into a psychological reality. And this is where the external world often begins to shift. Not because you have manipulated everyone around you, because your participation has changed. The person who relied on your weak boundaries encounters resistance. The person who only wanted your attention without offering commitment loses access. The opportunity you were too afraid to pursue becomes possible. The project you kept delaying begins to exist. The conversations you avoided become clear. The life that required your old identity begins to reorganize around your new one. Some things will move toward you. Some things will move away. Both could be evidence of transformation. Do not measure alignment only by what remains. Sometimes the strongest response reality gives you is removal. A relationship ends because you stop playing the role that sustained it. An opportunity disappears because it belonged to the version of you trying to prove something. A social circle changes because your growth exposes an old agreement. This can feel like punishment if you believe every loss means failure. But individuation frequently requires separation. You cannot carry every identity into the next chapter. You cannot preserve every attachment while becoming someone who no longer abandons themselves. The real question is not, did I keep everything? The question is, did I remain connected to myself? This is the inner state that reality responds to. A state that does not beg, does not perform, does not collapse every time the environment changes. A state rooted in psychological truth. But be careful. There's a counterfeit version of this power. It appears as coldness, superiority, emotional withdrawal, the declaration that you need no one. Some people are not centered. They are defended. They call avoidance peace. They call numbness detachment. They call fear independence. They call emotional unavailability strength. True inner power does not require you to become less human. It allows you to become more fully human without being consumed by every emotion. You can be deeply loving without abandoning yourself. You can desire something without becoming desperate. You can feel grief without losing your identity. You can receive support without surrendering your authority. You can be vulnerable without handing someone a weapon against you. You can care and remain centered. This is mature magnetism. It does not pull through manipulation. It attracts through wholeness. A whole person does not mean a perfect person. It means a person who is no longer at war with every inconvenient part of themselves. They can acknowledge ambition without shame, anger without cruelty, sensitivity without weakness, desire without self-contempt, fear without obedience. They do not need to appear pure. They are becoming real, and reality responds to what is real because realness changes every interaction. You no longer send mixed signals. You no longer ask for what you repeatedly reject. You no longer demand honesty while hiding your own truth. You no longer say you want change while protecting every habit that preserves the old life. Your energy becomes direct. Your actions become understandable. Your decisions acquire weight. This is why some people become more magnetic after a period of solitude. Solitude removes the constant mirror of other people. Without the audience, you begin discovering which parts of your identity were performances. What do you enjoy when no one is watching? What do you believe when no one is arguing? What do you desire when no one will applaud? Who are you when there is nothing to prove? These questions are not small. They reveal whether your life is organized around the self or the persona. Solitude can also expose how addicted you have become to stimulation. Messages, reactions, views, praise, conflict, romantic uncertainty. The mind may prefer even painful attention to the silence where it must encounter itself. But if you remain in that silence, something begins to return. Your own rhythm, your own taste, your own thought, your own direction. The psyche starts speaking in a quieter language. Dreams, symbols, intuition, sudden clarity, a growing discomfort with what is false, a growing attraction to what feels alive. Jung believed dreams were one of the primary ways the unconscious communicates with consciousness. When you ignore your inner life, the psyche may speak through symptoms, repetition, anxiety, fantasies, and dreams. It may present the same image again and again. A locked room, a neglected house, a hidden child, a threatening animal, a dark ocean. These images are not always literal predictions. They may represent parts of the psyche seeking integration. A house may symbolize the structure of the self. A hidden room may represent an unexplored aspect of your personality. An animal may represent instinct. A child may represent vulnerability, potential, or a wounded part of the past. When you begin paying attention, you develop a relationship with the unconscious. And the more conscious this relationship becomes, the less the unconscious needs to control your life through repetition. This is how fate becomes choice, not complete control. Choice. You recognize the pattern before it becomes another decade. You notice the attraction before turning it into obsession. You notice the fear before calling it intuition. You notice the persona before sacrificing your health to maintain the image. You notice the shadow before projecting it onto an enemy. Awareness creates a pause. The pause creates choice. Choice creates a new direction. And enough new choices create a new reality. You may be waiting for a dramatic internal feeling before you change. A moment of perfect certainty. A wave of confidence. A sign that fear has disappeared. But often, identity changes in the opposite direction. You act before the new identity feels natural. You establish the boundary while your voice still shakes. You begin the work before you feel ready. You leave the pattern while part of you still misses it. You speak honestly while fearing judgment. And through repetition, the psyche adapts. Courage is not always a feeling that arrives before action. Sometimes courage is the identity formed by repeatedly acting while fear is present. This is important because many people remain trapped in preparation. They consume information. They analyze. They visualize. They understand every theory. But they never risk becoming visible. The unconscious can use spirituality and psychology as hiding places. You can spend years studying transformation without allowing your actual life to transform. You can talk about energy while remaining addicted to approval. You can speak about detachment while secretly monitoring someone's every move. You can quote Jung while refusing to encounter your shadow. Knowledge does not automatically create power. Integration creates power. What truth have you understood but not embodied? What decision have you delayed because the old identity is asking for one more guarantee? What boundary have you explained repeatedly instead of enforcing once? What version of yourself are you still performing because you're afraid of who might disappear when the performance ends? Your answer may reveal where your energy is trapped. And wherever your energy is trapped, your magnetism weakens. Not because you need to become more desirable, because you're less present. Part of you is always elsewhere. In the past, in someone else's mind, in an imagined future, in a conversation you keep replaying, in an outcome you're trying to control. Presence returns when you stop dividing yourself across realities that do not exist in this moment. This does not mean ignoring goals. It means refusing to sacrifice the current self to the future self. You can move toward a goal without treating the present as an obstacle. You can build success without hating the stage you are in. You can desire love without making your current life a waiting room. You can pursue healing without identifying as permanently broken. A powerful inner state says, I am moving, but I am not incomplete. This is different from complacency. Complacency says nothing needs to change. Wholeness says change does not determine worth. When worth is no longer dependent on the outcome, you become more effective. You can evaluate reality honestly. You can admit when something is not working. You can adjust without experiencing every correction as humiliation. You can receive criticism without collapsing. You can take risks because failure no longer destroys your identity. This is why self-worth is not merely an emotional luxury. It is practical power. A person who knows their worth can leave what degrades them. They can wait for what is aligned. They can build slowly. They can recover from rejection. They do not need every door to open because their identity is not trapped behind one door. And ironically, this often makes them more attractive to life. They are available, not desperate, engaged, not controlled, open, not empty. To strengthen this state, begin each day before the external world enters your mind. Before messages, before numbers, before opinions. before you allow reality to tell you who you are. Sit in silence. Notice the state already present. Do not immediately try to change it. Name it. Perhaps you feel anxious, heavy, hopeful, resistant, clear, numb. Ask, what part of me is present today? Then ask, what does this part believe it needs? You may hear, I need certainty. I need approval. I need rest. I need reassurance. I need to be seen. Do not shame the answer. Listen, then ask a deeper question. How can I give myself a form of this without surrendering my authority to the world? If you need certainty, perhaps you can create a clear plan for the next hour rather than demanding certainty about the next year. If you need reassurance, perhaps you can remember evidence of your resilience. If you need to be seen, perhaps you can speak honestly in your journal before performing for an audience. If you need rest, perhaps you can stop calling exhaustion discipline. This practice creates an internal relationship. You become less likely to demand unconsciously from others what you refuse to provide for yourself. Then choose one quality you intend to embody, not an outcome, a quality: calm, courage, precision, patience, self-respect, openness. You cannot always control what the day brings, but you can practice how you meet it. This is how you stop obeying every fluctuation of reality. You decide the quality of your participation before the circumstance decides it for you. During the day, observe moments when your energy leaves your center. Perhaps you check for a response repeatedly. Compare yourself. Imagine the worst. Try to impress. Over-explain. Rush to repair someone else's discomfort. Each time, pause. Place attention back in the body. Feel your feet. Relax the jaw. Lengthen the breath. Ask, what am I trying to get from the outside right now? Approval? Safety? Control? Worth? Then ask, what action would reflect self-respect in this moment? Sometimes the answer will be to speak. Sometimes to wait. Sometimes to work. Sometimes to leave. Sometimes to apologize. Sometimes to stop explaining. There is no single behavior that represents power in every situation. Power is the ability to respond from consciousness instead of compulsion. At night, review the day without judgment. Where did you remain connected to yourself? Where did you abandon yourself? What activated the old identity? What did you do differently? This is not trial. It is observation. You are studying the psyche. Over time, patterns become visible. You may notice that you lose your center around authority figures, or romantic uncertainty, or financial fear, or public evaluation. These are not reasons for shame. They are maps. They show you where the complex still holds energy. And every time you meet that moment consciously, you reclaim part of your life. You do not need to become psychologically perfect before reality changes. You need enough awareness to stop feeding the same pattern automatically. One honest choice can interrupt years of repetition. One boundary can end an entire relational role. One act of courage can change the image you hold of yourself. One decision to stop chasing can reveal how much of the connection depended on your pursuit. One willingness to be seen can open a life that hiding kept impossible. The external result may not appear immediately. Do not use delay as evidence that the inner change is false. The old reality often contains momentum. Relationships contain established expectations. Habits contain repetition. Projects require time. A seed does not become unreal because the surface remains unchanged for a while. Your responsibility is not to force the surface. It is to remain faithful to the new psychological position. This is where many people return to the old pattern. They set a boundary, do not receive the reaction they hoped for, and withdraw it. They stop chasing for 3 days, receive no pursuit, and chase again. They begin believing in their work, see slow results, and conclude that the old identity was right. They are still allowing reality to determine their state. The new identity was not yet rooted. It was a negotiation. I will respect myself if the world rewards me quickly. That is not self-respect. That is another transaction. Real transformation says, this is who I choose to become even before the evidence arrives. Not because you are denying reality, because you understand that evidence often follows embodiment. You do not become disciplined after success. Discipline helps create success. You do not become worthy after love. A sense of worth helps you choose healthier love. You do not become confident after every person approves. Confidence grows when you survive disapproval without abandoning yourself. The inner position must precede the outer confirmation. And then, gradually, people begin to notice. They may not know what changed, but conversations change. You are less easily provoked, less available for confusion, more direct, more calm. You no longer fill every silence. You no longer volunteer explanations no one requested. You no longer chase those who repeatedly demonstrate distance. Your presence becomes heavier, not in a negative way, but in the sense that it carries substance. You are there, fully, not scanning the room for permission, not mentally leaving yourself to manage another person's perception. This is magnetism, It is the return of scattered energy, the return of projection, the return of attention, the return of authority. The world may call it confidence, but beneath confidence is something deeper: self-possession. To possess yourself means you are no longer psychologically owned by every reaction, desire, opinion, or fear. You can experience them without giving them the throne. You can listen to the ego without allowing it to lead. You can encounter the shadow without becoming destructive. You can wear the persona without forgetting your face. You can engage with reality without worshiping it. And this is perhaps the deepest meaning of creating an energy so strong that reality must respond to you. It is not domination over life. It is freedom from unconscious domination by life. You stop becoming whatever the moment demands. You bring a conscious self into the moment. And because your presence changes, the relationship between you and the world changes. Some people will respect you more. Some will resist you. Some opportunities will appear. Some will no longer interest you. Some desires will intensify. Others will dissolve because you realize they belong to a wounded identity. This is not merely getting everything the ego wants. It is becoming aligned enough to know which desires are truly yours. Jung did not describe individuation as a path to constant comfort. He described a movement toward wholeness. Wholeness includes responsibility. You can no longer blame every outcome on others once you see your participation. You can no longer call repetition fate once you recognize the pattern. You can no longer claim power while refusing the actions that power requires. But responsibility is not punishment. It is liberation, because anything you can participate in, you can begin to change. Perhaps not immediately, perhaps not completely, but consciously. Your life is not only happening to you. You are in relationship with it. Your beliefs, wounds, attention, actions, and choices enter that relationship every day. And the more conscious you become, the less the unconscious writes your future in invisible ink. So stop asking only, why is reality doing this to me? Ask, what is reality revealing about the state I have been living from? Stop asking only, why do people not recognize my value? Ask, where am I still betraying what I know is valuable within me? Stop asking only, why does nothing change? Ask, which identity am I protecting that requires everything to remain the same? These questions return power to you, not the power to control every event, the power to become someone who meets events differently. And that may change more than you realize, because the strongest person is not the one who can force reality to obey every desire. The strongest person is the one who no longer needs reality to confirm their identity before they begin living it. They do not wait to be chosen before choosing themselves. They do not wait for permission before respecting their own boundaries. They do not wait for certainty before taking the honest step. They do not wait for the world to become calm before developing peace. They begin within, and the world encounters them differently because they are no longer the same person. You are not here to become harder. You are here to become integrated. You are not here to suppress every emotion. You are here to stop allowing unconscious emotions to direct the entire course of your life. You are not here to build a perfect image. You are here to become real enough that you no longer need one. And when the real self begins occupying the space where the persona once performed, magnetism becomes natural. You no longer pull people through effort. You draw attention through presence. You no longer force opportunities through panic. You recognize and act on the ones that align. You no longer demand that life prove your worth. Your choices begin expressing it. This is the energy reality responds to. An energy that is not divided against itself. An energy that does not disappear when circumstances become uncomfortable. An energy that has encountered its darkness and recovered the life hidden there. An energy rooted not in arrogance, but in wholeness. So the next time reality presents you with delay, rejection, silence, or uncertainty, do not immediately ask what it says about your future. First, ask what it activates within you. Observe the old story. Contain the reaction. Meet the wounded part. Then decide who will respond. The old identity? The persona? The frightened ego? Or the deeper self that is becoming conscious through you? That decision, repeated again and again, is how a new life is built. Quietly, internally, before anyone else can see it. And then one day, people will say your energy has changed. They will notice that you no longer enter rooms the same way. You no longer speak with the same hesitation. You no longer chase what cannot meet you. You no longer collapse beneath the same triggers. They may call you lucky, powerful, magnetic, different, but you will know what actually happened. You stopped giving reality the authority to tell you who you are. You stopped allowing the unconscious to control your choices. You stopped abandoning yourself in exchange for acceptance. And when you changed your relationship with yourself, your relationship with the world had no choice but to change with it. If this message found you at a moment when your old identity is beginning to fall away, do not rush to rebuild it. Stay present. Listen to what your life is asking you to become. And remember, the reality outside you may take time to reorganize, but every time you choose consciousness over compulsion, truth over performance, and self-respect over fear, the transformation has already begun. You are no longer merely reacting to your life. You are becoming the psychological center from which a different life can emerge.